Okay, well, I suggest we get going, as there is nothing to be introduced today. It's just to say that today is a question and answer session. Very unusual because we've never done this before. And we're just going to look at your questions about specific things in your chart or maybe somebody else's chart. I only have our charts, the ones that people that signed up for today. But I mean, we can experiment as we go as well. Let's start. And I would like to ask maybe Stephen first, if Stephen wants to start, because I know you were a little bit in a hurry. And yeah, take us somewhere, Stephen.
Well, thank you very much for the courtesy of allowing the opportunity. So yes, as far as approaching the general theme of natal astrology and natal charts, I'd like to first reinforce something that you had mentioned earlier there, Redlina, that it's very important to get some background biographical information from the individual first person, rather than just looking at numbers and then making some type of projection. And it allows myself an opportunity to establish a personal relationship within the individual, which is very important. And part of it is being able to, I'm always curious why a person is interested in having their natal chart done. So that lets me know what the level of their motivation. Is it intrinsic or extrinsic? Extrinsic is, well, should I move? I have a girlfriend, a boyfriend, you know, are they right for me? You know, okay, that's the stuff. Okay, fine, I can help with that. However, when I get the understanding that an individual is interested in a greater understanding of their sense of empirical self as a deeper sense of unity within their sense of mind and not just brain, then I say, okay, fine. Now I know I can feel comfortable sharing more information with that individual. Now, the curiosity part that I have that I would like to share is the underlying premise of this astrology in the first place. What is the mechanism of action? And this is a theme that's millennium. It says, how does this stuff work? You know, how do the influence of the stars and the constellations really influence or determine our behavior? And there are certain schools of astrology, particularly mundane, that looks at a literalness of it. Oh, well, okay, this is vote certain this way or this way. The stock market going up and down, you know. Or, you know, the horary, you know, help me find my lost wallet. You know, what room was I leaving in? Or electional, where do I have the wedding? Is it going to rain that day? Is it going to be bad? You say, okay. But in terms of the other part of it, it's like we know about the truism of the platitude. Correlation is not causality. However, there seems to be an underlying theme within this particular group, because again, it's yours, Redlina, about having a perspective of Rudyard from this humanistic perspective, and connecting at least the writings of Jung, where Jung would have to scratch his head and say, well, I'm not sure, but it's synchronistic, a meaningful coincidence between seemingly unrelated events. Now, for myself, the inquiry just kind of goes a little deeper, and this is where I would find myself attracted to the principles of esoteric astrology, which of course are rooted particularly in Vedic astrology on the septenary model, the levels of consciousness on the different planes. And from a Western point of view, you say, well, just check out Genesis, the first 2 chapters. The entire Western tradition of metaphysics in terms of Western religion incorporates the septenary model. 7 days to create the earth. And then they go into, who had sex with whomever. The idea, though, is that working on a septenary model. So for myself, it's the idea of realizing that being animals, we are affected by our environment in very subtle ways. So the idea of alligators build nests, and depending upon how much stuff they put on it and what the temperature is, the temperature determines the gender of the alligator. And sometimes the alligators know that, sometimes they don't, but the temperature determines the gender of the alligator being born. So for myself, I don't know how many of you people follow the growing research concerning the electric universe, but generally there was considered like 3 states of matter: solid, liquid, and gas. But within the last century, all of a sudden plasma, X-ray tubes now becomes the 4th state of matter. And now we have these telescopes looking way the hell out there and seeing well, there seem to be filamentary strings between different galaxies, and there's this kind of electromagnetic field, Birkeland currents that kind of come and go. And so in one regard, you say, well, gosh, we're really surrounded by electrical currents. So from my point of view, I say, okay, let's look at it like that and say that there is an underlying, but let's say undetermined resonance of an affinity within an individual, and this is a disposition of their behavior. Now, the disposition of behavior can be latent or manifest. So for my idea, the manifest behavior doesn't really count very much because we're really looking at an essence of oneself. So let's say, okay, considering the moon, all right, as a planetary body, it's got its mass, and it affects tides, and it affects circadian rhythms, and it's inevitably connected with menstrual cycles and calendar events, and say, okay, but that's kind of on a surface event. But what's this more subtle stuff underneath? And regrettably, I really wanted to participate last week in the nodal moon stuff, because again, what's the symbolism of? I was thinking, well, the astrology is now all northern hemisphere. So you say, well, the north node means the future, and the south node means the past, only based on the premise of the North Star. But if we look at the Earth itself, there's a south pole and a south star, except it's got Polaris Australis. It's a 5.5 magnitude, very dim star, so it even can't be seen, but it's there. So the idea is like, well, which end is up, which end is down? But it comes back to me as how the individual incorporates the symbolism in terms of meaningful content. And in that particular way, I look at it, we can have a small radio, we can have a wideband radio, we can have a shortwave, and the idea of fine-tuning frequency adjustment so an individual experiences a resonance. Take a concept first and then experience a resonance. So in that particular regard, this is why I like to share the information with individuals about how the natal chart is constructed, so that they then have an opportunity to follow through on the information and see how that resonance connects with them. And this is why I've been attracted to the idea of the harmonics, because if I just look at a straight chart with a modulus 360 and the idea of doing the standard conjunction of 1, but then changing the harmonics to a different number frequency, that there's are again underlying patterns which kind of reveal themselves. And then this gets back to the idea of how open the individual is with the conversation of sharing of themselves openly, so then I can provide the assistance for them to have a more integrative understanding of what they are trying to understand within their life. And this is where then I would see the harmonic consideration come in. But that point I would like to make is far beyond that of the natal astrology. First, it's like, how are you doing? What's your interest? How can I help you? What's your feelings about astrology in the first place? And would you consider astrology looking like a map? And that here you've come onto the planet in whatever life form, whatever culture, whatever gender, and you got to find your way back home where you came from. And the astrology chart allows an individual a symbolic representation of how those lines match up. And then this goes back to the idea of the ray concept and the star Sirius, transducing energy through Ursa Major, which is then transduced through the planets, and then we have this kind of atmosphere that's around the individuals. But it seems that it's important that we as the individuals turn ourselves on to that receptivity and not just blindly go as a projection, but have at least a contemplative reflection of our own self with how we want to interact with the world around us, and actually that larger expansiveness. So kind of said a lot there, quick, short, but my point to share is that this would be kind of the information I would sit down with the person initially and say, well, okay, you're interested in astrology, there's a shallow end of the pool, then it goes really deep, and it goes off the continental shelf, and it goes, and it gets quite complicated. However, with a little bit of tools, everyone can navigate themselves through the charts. And so that's kind of how I like to present the information. But getting back to the sharing the curiosity, it's like, it's still an open-ended question. What is the mechanism of action? of astrology in an individual's life. And at that particular, I'll stop and just leave that there.
Thank you, Stephen. Well, this was a very philosophical look into how you approach the chart readings and everything that you do. My perspective is very similar to yours. I really liked what you said. Do you have a question, though? Do you have any question for us? Anything that you're curious about how we approach it, or maybe as we already had just this. I think this is a good time to mention. If you haven't seen this one, there was one discussion about consulting and how to approach our practices, those of us that are practicing, and good practices of working with clients and so on, for example, and techniques. That's on the playlist as well. But you touched a lot of
that was a
on
previous meeting. That was a previous meeting that's in your archives. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to point back to the archives because there was a very similar topic to what you just told about.
Now that I'm missing that, the second hour and a half, I'm now utilizing, your YouTubes to kind of catch up on the rest of the. So what you're saying is that one was in a previous.
It was I think about a month ago when we had that. It was the discussion about consulting and how to approach our work as astrologers and so on, which a lot of what you talked about I thought was very related to that topic. And it's so important. It's very important. Do you want to pose any particular question for us to?
Well, that was the one. My particular question was, how does an individual explain the mechanism of action on how astrology functions? That would be my question.
Right. Okay. Well, I will start very quickly answering you, and then you guys take from me forward. I don't always have to explain it, even though for myself I do have this philosophical base that I have sat down and really carefully thought about the way I want to speak about astrology and what it is, what it's for, what the purpose of this whole journey of exploring the birth chart is there for in the first place. Sometimes I do get into this with clients, but not always. I really loved what you said, that we need to, if I understood you correctly, that we need to figure out what level the client is in their desire to understand the material. Are they just curious about something, and do they want to solve superficial everyday problems for themselves here and now and quickly, and they want like ready solutions? And we can all spot when this is the case. We can all spot when someone doesn't need to be a client but just a friend of ours or somebody we're talking to, and is asking about our astrological knowledge, if they're just curious very, very superficially, and not into very deep psychological work and wanting to transform themselves, or not ready to be surprised by anything, or very sensitive about any criticism that may, subconsciously maybe, not directly, but come up during the talk about the chart. But usually these are also the sorts of people that would question astrology in general seriously, scientifically, let's say. And I was very concerned in the beginning when I started working with clients that I would get a lot of that, and I would have to have ready answers and very thought through explanations of what is my philosophical take and why this matters, why at the same time it doesn't have a very strict scientific explanation, and doesn't have to be one, I think, but it's still valuable and so on. So I was preparing to defend astrology. It's been about 4 years now in my case, and I haven't had even one case when I had to even touch on this, even once. I don't know why. Maybe it was just good luck, but normally people are very open, and I see that they become more and more open as time comes by. And I think the moment they meet me and I start talking and I start explaining just the very first few bits, then they get it in what direction I'm going. And they get it that they either play the same game as what I'm proposing indirectly with my approach, or they can directly ask something, in which case I would still go back to that approach, if that makes sense. But I will try to be a little bit more specific and try to talk them through and talk them into actually a psychological way of absorbing this that I've got to share with them. So that's my view. What do you think? What others would say about that? Do you ever justify astrology? Do you ever tell the story of people that tried to disprove it, but they ended up actually proving it's working? If we're looking at into that this way.
So you were directing that question back at myself?
To everyone. No, to everyone. Just, but if you have any comments, Stephen, go ahead.
All right. Just a real quick one is the idea that this idea of scientific validation has to do with replication with random controlled trials and getting into the quantum physics of things. The interaction of the observer influences. So it's a scientific method, but it can't be scientifically replicated because each person is a phenomenological expression of their own subjective life in an objective world. So it's kind of like, to me, okay, it's a case study of one. So this stuff pertains to you, but there's different levels of it, just like shoe sizes, pant sizes, shirts, and dresses. It's like, we want to be able to custom fit, where you're looking at in your particular life, what you're looking for with what's available, and rather than to say, oh, okay, we're not going to go into the deep end about rheological influences of Sirius affecting the monadic structure of one's inner sense of self. The individual says that's not there. My feeling, though, is that for all of us being incarnated spirits within the soul world of the animation on the physical plane, this stuff is intrinsic to our own genetic code on a spiritual level. Now, I can keep that in the back of my mind, but I'll still talk about the scientific method versus scientific proof, and that's where I'll make the distinction.
Yeah, well, most of the time I try to escape from the scientific argument altogether, because it's usually getting into a dead end, almost like you agreeing to participate in a conversation which is not supposed to be the conversation about the value of astrology in the first place, I believe, as you are, being approached by someone that obviously they're asking you these questions about, let's say, proving astrology scientifically. They haven't researched it. That's, I mean, 100% you would know that this person hasn't done their own research about what astrology is all about.
They've had their own emotional experiences. So in that particular regard, just looking at the presentation of the chart with just the simple personal planets and the moons, some of those can read over and say, well, there's a disposition here, that you're kind of impatient, you can kind of be snappy, sarcastic with people, you kind of have a tendency to be more self-seeking than generous, and the person goes, well, God, yeah, I've been like that. So, well, that's really interesting. So if I can contact them on a basic emotional level of where their experiences have been relating to the correlations of the symbolization, and say, well, if you can acknowledge this, then there's the other part then, because then we have the other planetary influences, which are more subtle, but more soft in their tone. And that's the one that we want to listen to in terms of personal growth. So, it's going to be a lot different if a person's like 22 versus 42.
Yeah.
I'm going to approach that individual quite differently.
Such an important point, that it's very, very different. We're still looking in the same chart, at the same chart. The chart never changes. This is a still photograph of the moment of birth. And I very often compare it with the fingerprint, which I think ties into what you're saying, that how unique it is. We can never reproduce the same, even if we can reproduce the same chart, then the circumstances, the era into which this chart appears in the world, and all the rest of the circumstances around it would never be combined in the same way. So yes, statistically, probably there is no point. Rather, if it's worth it, maybe trying to explain to people that it doesn't have to comply with these rules of scientific knowledge, which actually science is probably one of those fields that changes the most rapidly and changes and turns around, and the moment you discover something else, the old concepts are no longer valid. So why should we bother getting into this direction anyway? But yeah, it's probably worth explaining to people that it's not totally metaphysical at the same time as well. As there are many people out there that are also assuming that astrology is some sort of a mystic, psychic field that is not based on any data. Well, we're actually basing everything we do, all our discussions and interpretations and analysis, on the birth chart which is actually a piece of astronomical data at the end of the day, and we can't do without that. And we need to be pretty precise with it, with the calculation of it and everything, in order to be, not making those mistakes of simply getting out there the wrong information. Speaking of somebody's sun in a different sign, imagine what that would be if you get somebody's sun sign wrong and you're trying to give them direction and guidance about main things in their life, for example. Yeah. So that. By the way, I filled in the forms of your chart today so quickly that I apologize in advance if I made any mistake with that. So when I show a chart, please check it out and see if everything's correct in the data before we start, speaking about it. Okay. Do you guys have any more comments about this whole philosophical question that we started?
Of course.
Mark.
I have an idea which could work with the theory of morphogenetic fields, like Rupert Sheldrake was talking about. I think there is a question of collective mental convention. That means a great number of human beings agree on a certain division of the zodiac and saying we do like this, we do like that, and this means this, and this means that, and somehow it's something which exists first of all in the collective psyche, and then it happens because we have decided that this was the rules of the game. That's...
Yeah, but this consensus that we've got about the main thing is what they mean as symbols, and within a symbol, how much we've got plenty inside it. That's never possible to just list. This is because, as you said, in all those traditions of myth, of symbolic systems of cultures, they're all the same things. They're all the parts of human nature at the end of the day that everybody intuitively connects with. So that's why it's not probably that difficult for us to agree on what the sun needs to signify in general, what the moon needs to signify in general, or anything else in the chart.
I was thinking, for example, to explain how the system that was conceived in the northern hemisphere can work with people in the southern hemisphere, because an Aquarius in Australia, is it an Aquarius or a Leo?
We had that question some time ago, I remember. We only very briefly touched on it, but I think we came to the conclusion that it's the same astrology, regardless of the hemisphere.
Yes, and that's why my answer to Stephen's question about how does it work is I think it's a collective psychic convention. And not the influence of the seasons.
Well, it's both, I would argue, because the influence of the seasons was part of how this whole thing was described, and stories were told about it in the northern hemisphere, because that's where Western culture was mostly concentrated, and this is just what was the observable reality. So they connected the symbols to this part of the world that actually was the writer of the symbols, the teller of the stories. So still, I mean, from what you're telling me, I can see that you haven't still touched on the pulse of life, as we talked about. But Rudyard's book, The Pulse of Life, is giving us this perspective, which is by no means the only perspective. You can think about that in many, many different ways, of why the zodiac is so connected to the seasons. And it's not a direct connection like a physical connection. It's again symbolical, but it's got to do with not that much seasons as what happens in nature, even though that's part of it as well. But it's the whole process of life getting born, kind of coming to the surface, and the different steps to which it goes from personal, development over time, almost like a small child, goes through all the different ages, and how it reaches a middle point where it needs to connect with other people.
You didn't understand. You didn't understand.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I wasn't really commenting more on what you were saying.
Oh,
It's
okay,
just
okay.
I started more with the job, but I hear from you and from I think from others several times that why the zodiac is not connected to the seasons, and because in that book it's mostly connected to the seasons. That's why I mentioned that.
It is symbolically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's possible to live in a region of the world or on the equator, where the seasons are. They don't know the 4 seasons on the equator.
Well, the seasons are not really the temporal seasons, like spring, summer, and so on. It's the division of time that it takes the Earth to make one whole revolution around the sun. That's what we refer to by the seasons. It's not to do with really the seasons as we know them. Because, yeah, you're right. Yeah?
All this was born from things which were directly lived by people who needed to plow the fields and to breed the cattle and to survive throughout the year.
Yeah, that's why astrology has evolved from the rural, vitalistic ages when it meant one thing mostly. But now I would argue today astrology is on a different level, and that's really the transition that Dane Rudier helped for, and to modernize astrology and to put it into this psychological perspective that explains the science and the connection with the seasons now is not a vitalistic connection like a nature connection. It's more to do with human nature as seasonal, and psychological human nature, which is dividing itself into so many different departments depending on where we are.
Sure, but it definitely starts with our experience.
Oh yeah.
It cannot. We cannot understand anything
No
if
question.
we don't refer to our concrete experience of life through our senses.
Yes.
And
yeah, that's
then,
how it started.
It takes some distance.
Have you guys seen the book, the Astrology of Personality by Rudier? Maybe Dwayne knows about that one. It's going through those different historical stages of what astrology.
Yeah, I've started reading it.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, it was updated later. I mean, this is the very, very early writing and a bit difficult to read maybe. But later on, it's some of these things, they are updated.
I'm a bit intrigued by when he says that for people before, time was kind of linear.
Mm-hmm.
And only leading to decay and death, and it seems to me that a circular conception of time, I've already heard it talking rather as a traditional conception that people had before, and that the linear conception of time is rather a problem of our modern world. And Rudyard seems to present it the other way, as if the linear time was how prehistoric people were living time, and us now becoming aware of its cyclicity.
Oh, exactly.
So I find this a bit confusing, because it seemed to me that this cyclic conception of time is something very ancient and traditional.
Maybe only when we talk about the sun and the moon, because they were observable and people were guiding their cyclical, for example, in agriculture and their normal life by observing the different positions of the solar-lunar cycle. But the rest of the planets, maybe they were not seen as cyclical at the time, because they were...
The conception of time, of cultures, of entire cultures, of people who were not into astrology and not especially into reading books, the conception of time of people in a particular culture.
Mm-hmm.
So what does Rudyard mean by a linear conception of time then? Can you explain that?
That time was perceived. I'm at the beginning of his book about astrology of personality, and linear would mean kind of representation, a line with from the past to the future, and it's a straight line, and it leads to decay and death.
Right. Okay.
One moment after another.
So in what context was that given?
Well, when he refers to the evolution of astrology and of the evolution of our take on reality.
So this was part of the first stages. Is that what?
So he mentions a linear time as part of the we say primal stages, which surprises me.
Oh, so you were thinking, okay, maybe I see what I have forgotten what this is all about in the book, but the linear time is isn't it how people were basically not realizing that every new cycle is not brand new, but it's got its cyclical connection to the previous one. So every year when everything started again, yes, you're right, they were observing the cyclicity, they were observing that things are coming back. So we have spring again, we have summer again, and so on. But people were thinking that these are completely different every time, and that nature basically dies every year, and something new gets born the next year. But the connection was lost, so it wasn't this spiral connection.
Well, that's what that's what Rudyard said. But I've also read Mircea Eliade.
Sorry?
You know Mircea Eliade?
Yeah.
He's a historian of religion. So he's someone who studied the symbolic representation of man during ancient times, and the way I understood was that the conception of, we don't say primitive nowadays, we say premier people, was rather cyclical, and rather based on the idea of the eternal return rather than linearity. And Eliade would present linearity as this kind of modern mechanistic conception, which is disconnected from the original myth. So I found something that I may not have understood in reading Rudyard, because he's difficult to read anyway.
Yes, it is quite difficult to read. I'm also not sure I got that, but it may have to do with, and maybe this is the last thing I'm going to say about this, because I feel like it may be a bit confusing for some of you, that, he talks a lot about, not in just this book, but in many, many places, about how the vegetation dies in the end of autumn. And maybe this linearity that he was referring to in these first stages was to do that when this happened in nature, people were thinking that that's it. This was the end. That was the death of it, of life.
Yeah, no, people didn't think that.
But even today, that's one of the greatest misconceptions, isn't it? That that there can be certain parts of the old cycle that remain and continue as seeds in the next cycle. But that's probably too philosophical at the moment to get into these waters. But yeah, maybe we can all go and see what this is all about. And you stirred my curiosity to go back to that book and see what really he meant there. Maybe
when we talk, for example, about Ceres and Dionysos, the ancient Greek god Ceres, which is an asteroid.
Ceres,
Ceres is now even a dwarf planet, considered a dwarf planet by science. But anyway, the difficult to pronounce mysteries from ancient Greece, Eleusinian mysteries, where Demeter, her Greek name, and Dionysos were celebrated, were really the mysteries of death and rebirth. And Demeter and Dionysos were gods which were not always happy. Most immortal gods were always living in a state of ecstasy. They were happy and feeling good in their own diving skins. But Dionysos and Demeter were, Dionysos, there were in certain rites, it was told to be dismembered and cut into pieces. And with the myth of Demeter and Persephone, she goes in winter to the underworld and comes back in spring. So all these mysteries were the mysteries celebrating how life was cyclical and dying and getting born again.
But that was later. That was later when the cultures of the Greeks already conceived those. So I think what you read about was for a much older, how can I say? But maybe it wasn't about this at all. Maybe it wasn't. I feel like there is a bit of a misunderstanding somewhere about this concept.
Even if it's much older, intuitively, because, well, I am not an expert of shamanism and prehistoric religions, but it seems to me that the concept of linear time is something which is typical of the scientific era.
Mm-hmm.
When we get disconnected from precisely what our grounding is in mythologies and in symbolic language, and of our spiritual roots, and become so rational and analytical that time become just one moment after another, and it can only go right and leads us to decay and death, but we don't see, we lost connection with this maybe natural faith that everything is always renewed.
Because wasn't time rooted in nature? Essentially, it was, that it was observable through the sun and the moon, through day and night, and observing the stars. But I think it was the monotheistic religions, surely, that introduced that idea, that concept of linear time, I think, because that separated people from nature. Before this, everybody was essentially a heathen or a pagan, weren't they?
Yes.
Like all over the world. And then, these monotheistic religions came along, and religious syncretism, and just sucked it all up into this.
The notion,
sort of,
It's with the Bible, with the Torah, the Genesis, the story of Adam and Eve. And I remember the same, it's a historian of religion that I read, who explains that actually when we start telling the story of the original sin and Adam and Eve in the beginning, and in the beginning this happened, and then later on a savior will come back. At that moment, that's the beginning of the conception of linear time, because there is a particular origin and it will unfold, and then it's not the eternal cycle always renewed, something like that. But
and then you have the concept of heaven being, or the afterlife being, this absolute place where nothing changes, and you live and then you die and then you go there, and you never come back. Whereas, I mean, Gaurav would probably attest to this, in the Vedic traditions and further back, you always had this myth of eternal return, that you would be recycled essentially. You'd come back again and again, you would relive a different life, a different consciousness or identity or whatever. But you would be part of that whole cycle of nature where you would be renewed again. There was always that sense, I think, and even if it was just an intuitive sense, if it wasn't written down, but it was always, I believe, it was always there in the so-called primitive psyche, whatever the word is, but originals. Yeah, I think so anyway.
Yeah, I think so as well.
Well, that's all very logical, isn't it? To assume that people were not disconnected from the cyclicity concept. But it's very difficult for me to comment because I don't know exactly what you read and what it really said. And but you stirred my curiosity, so I'll go back to this book maybe this week and see what this is all about. Okay, well, we went into a very philosophical direction. Do you want to now go into maybe practical questions more, whatever you guys feel like? Because also want to remind you that some of us here are not very advanced in astrology or in reading Rudyard or anything like that. So let's try to be a bit more down to earth and see how we can maybe integrate what we're talking about into practice. Any practical questions someone wants to start with about your charts or about something else?
Right. I have a
Also
question.
philosophical. Yeah, go ahead, Lucia.
The thing is that, well, I guess you all are teachers, right? I guess you all know quite a lot about this world. I know nothing at all, and I come from another from another from another type of business, right?
That's
And I was wondering about autism. Children, actually, autistic children, and I was wondering if there's any pattern in the natal chart that can tell you that they're gonna be autistic.
right.
Is there anything, or is maybe, I don't know? Is there anything that can tell you about autistic kids?
Okay, good question. Anyone wants to start with the answers?
Someone asked a question on my group, and
Yeah,
it became
I was
such
expecting
a
you would say something.
battlefield.
Yeah, because of that.
Do you remember?
And what did you answer? Because I didn't follow through. What was the answer? So Lucia, Jean-Marc is running a very interesting group on Facebook, which is called Astrological Buzz. If you want guys to take a look,
Thank you.
you can write it down, Jean-Marc. And
Astrological
somebody had posted just yesterday, I think, a very similar question to yours, to the one that you just said. So I only saw the question, but I didn't really read through what people were saying. So.
My answer, I will try to be quick because it's possible to make an improvised lecture on the topic. But first of all, autism is a spectrum, and therefore, because autism is a spectrum, it's not just something, it can manifest in various ways, and at the level of autism, it can be various things, and I'm not sure it's clearly defined. And we shouldn't look at a chart and make a diagnosis because it could also be illegal. And I think that we can see when someone will be heavily challenged at the level of communication and social skills, which is something which is typical to autism. So if you have strong challenges, so heavy squares from the transpersonal or Saturn to Mercury and Venus, for example, you can be sure that the person is likely to struggle with their communication and social skills. Now, is this going to manifest as autism or in a different way, which would be labeled differently by official science? I don't know.
Well, what I would say is that imagine you just have a chart and you don't know who that is. You don't know if this is a kid or if it's somebody, or even if this is the chart of a person, because in astrology we can make a chart of an event as well, of something else, of anything that has a beginning, that has been born at some point. It doesn't have to be a person. It could be your pet, for example, as well. And just by looking at that chart, even if you're the smartest astrologer on earth and you know all the rules in the books of what different aspects, even challenging aspects, as Jean-Marc said, squares to Mercury or involvement of Saturn or whatever, many things can point to problems. But there is absolutely nothing, in my view, that can guarantee, that can bring you the diagnosis. Even if you want to share it, even if it's legal to share it, even if it's ethical to do it, there is still no guarantee that what you see in the chart will necessarily result in autism or in any other condition. Because these astrological symbols, they can mean the same thing. So the same thing, that's the basic meaning, can express itself in life in so many different concrete ways. And one of the possible ways could be this. So my very quick answer is no. There is no way you can diagnose that without having the person there. But if you already have a case of an autistic child, and then you look at the chart, then the chart can be very helpful if the astrologer is good into working through the issue or finding clues of how to, first of all, you can trace where this could be having its roots. Because the chart, in my particular way of looking into it, is evolutionary way. That means that it's got a history. It's not just the chart now, but to have that chart, there is a reason why the person was born with that chart. And if Mercury squares Saturn, which in other words means a hard aspect to the communication planet Mercury, then yeah, we may have something like this, we may not. It could be a very disciplined mind. Saturn square Mercury could be somebody with extremely well developed disciplined mind, efficient mind, or it could be just the other way around. We don't know. But if you know that the person is struggling and you know there is a problem, then you can investigate where this could have its roots in childhood maybe, or in the parents, or in the family, or maybe not. And also you can suggest how to work through that and what positive ways of using that same combination of energies that are difficult in the chart can help, so that there is again a very individual answer to that case. Do you guys agree with me on this?
Yes.
What about medical astrology? What would you say about that? I don't know a lot about medical astrology, but there is a branch of astrology that is dedicating itself into diagnosis of disease. And this is usually the traditional astrology, the one that's using the ancient methods. And that astrology is very different in its techniques and its philosophy and everything to the psychological one that we are talking about mostly here. But what would you say? I mean, maybe you, Kara, tell us how in your tradition you deal with it.
I was listening to your conversation.
There is some background music, maybe? Around you?
Yeah. It's my daughter with voice.
Your daughter?
Yeah. So she's playing with toys, but I hope you can hear me as well. See, I teach medical astrology. I have researched over this subject extensively, and in Vedic system, medical astrology, we can pinpoint, if not precise, but very closely to the organ, to the part of the
Gaurav,
body.
I'm very sorry to interrupt you, but it's very hard to hear you. Maybe if you can, yeah,
I think
right.
this would be better now. So in Vedic astrology, we have an entire system under the medical stream, the medical astrology part, where we can identify which part of the human body will have illness. Then it comes to what illness. Then we have specific set of systems which we use to get to the precise part of it, that what can be the illness. In fact, many times I have got very good success with the concepts that I use. I can share one previous recent case there, where there was this pilot who was, it was asked as a question, it was kind of a competition kind of thing, where you have to assess the illness of the person. And there was this pilot who was not flying an airplane, but he had the license. Now the question was why. It was asked by a set of research group which I was part of. Why? So nobody could tell that, but I worked it out and I said there could be 2-3 possibilities, because he is not working as a pilot, and I specifically mentioned there is something wrong with the abdominal part of this person. We can pinpoint the moles on the bodies or the marks on the body through the Vedic system. So then later on, it was told that this person suffered from a back injury. Because of that, he had some trouble in the lower part of his backbone, and again, which is a part of the abdomen, and he was not able to fly anymore. So he was renewing his license, but was not flying anymore. So this system of the system of this medical astrology deals to identify what organ may get ill. Then the second part is which illness will be in the organ, and then the third part is when. Then we need to identify the time. So, I mean, it's not new to us. We have had n number of charts, and there is a proper approach to it with which we can identify an organ. So that brings me to a question somebody asked about autism. So in our Vedic texts, any autism is related to functioning of brain, right? If I am correct.
Sorry?
If all of autism is related to functioning of your brain, right?
Right.
So what we, I mean, there are it's a very simplistic way. Affliction of moon in the chart is of primary essence. Obviously, affliction of moon, then affliction of ascendant is very important. The ascendant lord has to be afflicted. When these two are afflicted, because we consider in Vedic moon as your consciousness, and consciousness is heavily afflicted in case of autism. It is directly related to the individual because subconsciously the individual has trouble explaining things or getting things the way he wants to perceive them, or he wants others to perceive the things. So consciousness is binded there. There may be affliction of moon. Secondly, John Mark said that Mercury and Saturn heavily associated in the squares, but I would agree with that, but I would go a step further. Any ill combination, any malefic combination of Saturn and Mercury would also promote that. So I would not, I would suggest don't apply these combinations on just one or two charts. At least take, like 20, 30 charts to research this well. That is how we research it here. Only then we confirm what is happening in what is the common thread among those charts. So this is something which is there. The affliction of moon, the affliction of ascendant, Saturn, Mercury conjunction or relationship any way whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay,
that is of key essence here.
Yeah, okay, Gaurav, I appreciate what you're saying, but still there is no guarantee that a particular thing in the chart points directly to this particular condition. I think it's very important for us to say that to people that are not very much into astrology. There is nothing that can guarantee that. And what's the point at the end of the day? Because
it is the amount of affliction that will promise. When we work out the promises of chart, we can understand the amount of affliction.
Yeah, fair enough. I know that you are more into the predictive side of things, and they have their value as well. And in certain cases, maybe it's great to have that opportunity to to narrow down to the chart what could be happening with this person, which is great. But I'm also very concerned about the cases where I think there were more than one questions yesterday in your group, Jean-Marc, about something like this. There was another woman asking about her child that had started displaying something negative about the moon in Aries. I remember that very much because she was like, "Oh, I heard so many negative things about the moon in Aries. My child is a small child now. He's starting to display some of these things. Shall I be worried?" It was something like this. And this is a perfect example of how we shouldn't use astrology for that purpose, because no, it doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't mean anything, actually, absolutely anything in particular that the moon is in Aries. It's only meaning something in the context of the whole chart and in the context of the age at which the person is in, the whole complex situation around them. And then we can, even if it's something negative, then there is also always a positive side to this, a positive expression of the energy that we can advise for them to, to go into that direction and start working with the other. But this fatalistic thinking about what's in the chart doesn't determine us. The chart doesn't determine illness, doesn't determine character in full extent. It's only a tendency. So yeah, we can follow through and see that there is a tendency of problem with communication, problem with something. And it's very, very obvious that we can make that conclusion. But what exactly that's going to be, what of the many, many conditions out there that would come out as, we don't know. And whether it will even happen, in the first place. So we have to be, I think, very careful with this if we want to be helpful, really helpful. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why astrology has this negative negative reputation in most of the time still today, because all those things still need to be explained and reputed and brought into a different field of explanation, and not this direct cause and effect, because there is nothing like that going on here. Okay, do you have any other views on this, or shall we move on to another question?
I agree with you, Redilita. I kind of try to, when I look at a chart, I try not to read too much about like aspects and transits, because the more I read, the way I approach chart reading, I really found it very interesting what Stephen said. How would you explain how it works to someone who is maybe more scientific mind? And the way, like, I have a lot of friends who are very in scientific fields, and the way I explain it, I look at astrology, I look at it with a very intuitive point of view. When I look at a chart, I look at what my intuition is saying more than what I've read about, let's say, Mars and Pluto, or Moon and Pluto. So I try to see at any given point what the chart is trying to tell me, or what my intuition is rather telling me. And I kind of approach it that way. And even though I do read about astrology, but I try not to have a set notion, because as you said, there are so many things a certain aspect can be telling you. It's about how much you know of your own, like if it's your own chart you're seeing, how much you know of your life and your own makeup, and what that thing could mean to you could be entirely different to what it could mean to another person with another set of experiences. It's highly subjective. And so I kind of tend to trust my intuition a lot more than, I do tend to read a lot, but I kind of give my intuition more importance.
Okay, I see. Well, that's great when you have the basis of the knowledge. And when I say knowledge, I don't mean memorizing what Mercury square Pluto means in all those cookbooks out there that you can find, but it's more getting deep into the concept of Pluto as an energy, Mars as an energy, all of them, all the symbols. I think if the person doesn't have this deep understanding, really has researched, really has thought about it in their own time before applying it to a chart, and this conceptual basis of things, which is very important knowledge. You can't just rely on intuition, because if you do that only on intuition, then you don't need a chart in the first place. You don't need to use the astrological tools in the first place. You can just, help people in another way, in an intuitive way, which is still psychological. But if you have that basis of knowledge, and the deeper it is, something else that Rudyard says is that the deeper your knowledge is, the more your intuition works. And actually, he agrees with you that the intuition needs to be given prevalence at the end of the day, without thinking, 1, 2, 3, 4, and listing all the aspects and making this detailed analysis that leads you nowhere at the end, because you get more confused. But the argument is that this intuition is not really working properly. It's not combining. This is the Sagittarius mind. You are a Sagittarius sun. It's not working properly if it doesn't have the base knowledge.
Proper knowledge. Yeah, I agree. But I would like to say something that Jean-Marc always says. An opposition in a chart doesn't necessarily have to mean something negative. Like, I try not to see also with like a fatalistic view something. Like, I like what Jean-Marc says, that an opposition could mean that the two bodies are sitting across the table from each other and having a conversation. So, it's just like different point of views of looking at the same thing. But what I was trying to say is it's highly subjective to the place that you're coming from. Like, everybody that asks you a question about astrology is really trying to hear a particular answer that they already have in mind.
Yeah,
most
that's
of the
right. And
times.
you're just confirming. But one of the things I often say to people is, I'm not supposed to tell you anything new today in the consultation. I'm just supposed to confirm what you already know and connect the dots and tell, rather give you an explanation why it is the way it is, rather than discover something completely new that you didn't know. And the other thing is that you just need to be able to allow the information to flow through you and to trust that they're asking you because you need to give it through your perspective as an astrologer, which is, yes, as you said, very, very subjective.
And the other
Inevitably.
person can only understand it from their understanding on how much their understanding is.
Yeah.
So they cannot understand. You keep on saying red, red, red. If they are colorblind, they're not going to understand what you mean by red.
Which is our job to judge. It is our job. If we are good astrologers, we need to have a different strategy, a different way of speaking to the different people that come to us based on what we, slightly feel. We cannot know everything about them, obviously, and judge them completely. We shouldn't. But at least we should adjust our language, or we should adjust our approach to be helpful. Because if that's the main thing that we're worried about and interested in, to be helpful, then we would always, I trust, find the best way. But what you mentioned about the opposition aspect, for example, and this is another of the big topics of Dane Woodyear, constantly reminding and repeating that nothing is good or bad in astrology. That's the other thing that I always like. Somebody comes and they say, is this my chart good or bad? So is it too bad? Like, usually they think it's too bad or something like this. I need to spend a lot of time, not that much scientifically proving astrology, but more to this question. That to say there is nothing good or bad in your chart. It's what it is. And it could be very good or it could be very bad. It may be a chart full of trines and sextiles and you can make a mess of it. And you can live a dull life, which is totally, non-adventurous, not developed, and so on. And the most interesting people, they say, and the most, I don't know, the most successful people, whatever we understand by this, are said to have the most squares and oppositions in their chart. So, yeah, for example. But yes, everything is at least with two meanings, the minimum, maybe more.
Also, I like what Stephen said about frequencies. So the way I have seen astrology affect me is, it's like, to me at least, it's like tuning into something that's so much bigger than what you thought your world is or what you think you are. It's like suddenly you're tuned into a frequency and you see yourself part of a bigger picture. And it kind of gives you a sense of a place for yourself. I don't know if I'm making sense, but that's one way to kind of have a take of astrology.
Yes, so it is. Okay, thank you, Sindra. Any other questions or comments?
A quick comment that sometimes when someone is genuine in their question about astrology and science, I tell them that psychology is taught in universities and there is no scientific basis for psychology, for most psychological theories. It's not possible. So it's not possible for astrology. My question is about, is a question about orbs, and more specifically, what orbs are you using with the nodes?
With the nodes, just with the nodes.
Oh, you can talk about orbs for the sextiles compared to the squares, if it's interesting as well. But precisely now I'm thinking, is 10 degrees an orb that you can use with nodes, or do you take it much tighter?
This is one of the most subjective things that has no right or wrong answers, I guess. So yeah, anyone want to say?
I find it interesting because nodes are not planetary bodies; they are kind of positions, right? So I always take I allow 10 degrees for planets and maybe like 3 to 4 degrees for positions myself when I'm looking at it. I would be interested to find what your take on it.
Anyone else wants to comment before I say? Okay, so all right, just my personal way, which is just my personal way, nothing more than that. I consider nodes extremely important in the chart, even though they're not physical points. To me, they are mega energized things, you know, something that when it aspects something else, especially our personal planet, this is a big deal to me. So, for example, my Mars is about 7 degrees from my south node. Still, I consider it conjunct my south node. And I've got, you know, my observations from my chart and for other people's charts confirm that if something is, you know, gravitating around the nodes by, say, to make a conjunction, to be at the same place as the nodes, this is extremely important. When it's squaring it, when squaring the nodes, this is inevitably part of that story of the past, which is translated into the present, even if the orb is a little wider. So I wouldn't go more than 10 degrees, but I very often allow to up to 10 degrees, even for the nodes. And I have to change the settings in astro.com because they by default give you the aspects for the nodes only up to, I think, 3-4 degrees, something like this.
Okay.
And especially when it's, well, actually, I don't make a difference if it's a personal planet or a non-personal, let's say transpersonal planet. Because, for example, Pluto being involved with the nodes somehow, regardless of how, is a big deal as well for me. And this is always showing up somewhere in the real world, in the real circumstances. So in general, about orbs, I use 10 degrees, unless, depends what you're doing. So we're talking today about natal charts, you know, the birth chart. But if you're doing horary astrology, like you're trying to predict an event where you're using mostly the moon as a you know, the cycle of the moon through the month and other factors, then maybe I would use smaller orbs there. Definitely use small orbs for things like the progress sun, because it's moving so slowly that there is no point, you know, doing. The moment you increase the orb, you've got a lot more information to analyze, isn't it? Because a lot more aspects pop up. So some astrologers, just out of practicality reasons, so that they don't bog themselves down with all the details and, you know, impossible to synthesize and so on. That's why they decrease the orbs up to, say, 4 or 5 degrees and something like that. This gives you just the essence of the chart, you know, the most important. Because you may have noticed, and this is common knowledge, that the closer an aspect is, the more active it is. So if you have a 0 degree square by 2 planets, this is possibly going to be more essential in the life of the person than another 7 degree square or something like that. So, you know, out of practicality, some people narrow down and just use the very first few big aspects that pop out. But because I'm very used to myself looking into the chart as a whole picture, as a whole story, sometimes parts of this story are missing, or I can't figure something out if I don't allow up to 10 degrees, at least in the beginning, when I'm just starting to look at it. It's just starting to, but then when I have to translate it, obviously I'm not going to talk about all those aspects. I'll just choose the ones that are the most exact, and they usually end up to be the most important anyway. But there are some cases when this can turn things around into one direction or the other, the slightly bigger orb. I trusted Liz Green on this, to be honest. That's she says up to 10 degrees. That's her, you know, preferred orb. I'm not sure about the notes, what she does with the notes, but in several places I've read her saying that she prefers 10 degrees. Maybe with the slower planets we can go, well, transits of Pluto, transits of Uranus and Neptune, I go a little lower than that. But I was disproved myself a couple of years ago when Pluto, for the first time, squared my sun. So, you know, Pluto square sun is the transiting Pluto square your sun is a big deal, a big aspect, once in a lifetime aspect, which is transformational, which is very, yeah, we expect a lot of it. So that happened on the day when I had this Pluto getting into 10 degree orb from my sun as a square. And maybe I'm making it up, and this is just but I checked it out later after the fact and saw that this was going on. It turned out that this was felt, even though it was 10 degrees. So it's like a crossing a threshold kind of feeling. And then after that, it's getting closer and closer, and really, but emotionally that could be felt. So yeah, it's just my way. Any other options?
Yeah, I think it's like looking at the wood and the trees, isn't it? Where you've got like the most important planets are the things that you can see right in front of you. That's the close aspects. And then when you part those, you get into the wider aspects, which is the background stuff. So you wouldn't normally notice that at first, but they're still there. But you can include them if you want. You can be selective. But like you say, it's how much you want to take on as an astrologer. How wide you want to go, isn't it? You know, how complex you want, how deep you want to go into the chart, and that depends on the client as well, I suppose. But ultimately, it's down to us, isn't it, as astrologers, where we set the line, kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
My question about orbs is complicated by the question of house systems, because I find the nodes, like a number of you I know, very, very important, especially for the evolutionary path. And the question is sometimes, but like in your chart, Adelina, when the node is close to the cusp of a house while still being in the previous house.
Yeah. Counting in the two houses I usually.
Yeah, and this is annoying.
No, why? I actually find it very interesting. I'll tell you why.
No, it's annoying when you're an astrologer and you find the chart and you
only if you are very concerned about giving a definitive answer to someone about something.
Yeah, because I'm using the nodes really as among the essential indicators, and I start with them to find the general structure. So
yeah, but you know, when you have my case where the nodes are in the cusp between houses, isn't it even more interesting to explore the story with the client, what it could be, whether this house or the other house? And then you discover so much more. I ended up thinking that in my case, and maybe in any other case of this sort, it's a question of you have reached almost the end of a journey in the previous, let's say in your previous life, the South Node, and you have been, you have already started looking to the other side, to the next house. But you didn't have maybe enough time or enough opportunity, or you were just a bit lazy, or I don't know, whatever may have been, but you didn't finish the transition process. And it is a transition process between the two houses, or maybe topics of both of them were mixed together.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, and that's even more interesting because consecutive houses, they're connected. You know, like the 5th and the 6th, in my case. If you were partying, hard partying, in the 5th house, let's say, for example, then maybe you had already reached the point when you had to stop and, reverse the process and reform yourself and think about it. Or maybe you got ill, or maybe you lost all your fortune because you gambled. And
then you
already,
got to work.
yes, and you were already in the 6th house kind of thing. But then the 6th house conditioning is very, very related to what you just did in the 5th house.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I find that these things are very interesting, actually. These transitional, if you imagine the cusps of the houses as those magic borders, like very, very interesting things can happen around the borders. Not as interesting as, more interesting than in the middle, where it's more neutral. Well, here all sorts of things are developing around the cusps. And when planets are gravitating around cusps, then maybe these planets are more visible in the life, they're more energized, they push almost like gatekeepers of each one of those gates. And when something or somebody approaches that house in your life, then this planet is standing there and it's filtering everything, or it's representing what's going on there. So it's I find them very interesting when they're close to cusps, even if I can't say exactly on which side they are.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I do. If it's okay, I did put in the chat. However, I wanted to know, I wanted to first and say thank you again, everyone. And I do appreciate this opportunity. It's been a pleasure and enjoy seeing everyone's beautiful faces on my computer screen and listening to what everyone is saying about birth natal charts and astrology. I am a beginner baby, even though I'm over 40. I'm still a baby in this thing, right? And so I just pulled my natal chart earlier. Based on what Stephen shared earlier about maybe it could be a reason why people are wanting to look into their birth natal chart, or like what is the reason why people want to like look more into it. And so for me, the reason for, I'm gonna be honest, it was a guy. It was a guy that made me look into my birth natal chart because of it just wasn't meshing. It was like, what is going on? Why was it not meshing? So if it's okay, I'd like to share my screen.
I have already just shared mine with your chart on it, Beatrice, if you don't mind.
Let me see. Oh, I see it. I'm using two monitors here. I'm sorry.
Yes, I just wanted to do it from my end because I use a specific way of showing it, and it just makes more sense with the rest of the charts. Otherwise, we may end up.
That's mine. That is my chart. I see my name. My bad.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look through it, but
I was looking.
I saved it before we started, so here it is.
Thank you. And I looked at it just as a briefly. I was like, oh, that's almost look like mine. So that is the one. Let me turn so I can still look and see. My question is, do I have a stellium in my 7th house? There is a lot of planets, a lot of activity over there. And it seemed like that is the constant basis of my life, of trying to find a partner, trying to find someone that I can build with. And sometimes it works, sometimes it does not work. And as I said, most recently, this was earlier this year, the guy that made me look into it, because it was like a past person that came back into my life. And I'm like, what are you doing? Contact me from other phone numbers. I'm like, what? Leave me alone? No. And so I looked into the astrology at the time, and it did say something about like people coming back past in your life. I'm like, yep, that's me. That's what happened. So now I see like, I got a whole lot of activity in my 7th house. I see Saturn is in the 6th house, but I really don't feel like he's over there by himself. I don't know why he's over there by himself, but he's like really close. I hear about the degrees, and technically he's not in the degree to go over there, but he's over there by himself. And I'm like, I feel like he's like in that Chris Brown song, he's hating from the outside, can't get in the club because everybody else is partying in the 7th house. So my question is, I'm saying a lot. I got a lot of activity in my 7th house. There is something about like because I have stuff on the upper half. Is that the means that like I have lived my life in the public more? I mean, I am in the public, but should I be okay? I'm like, okay, go out, be more into the public because I have that. And there's also, because the stellium's in the 7th house, is in the upper half. Do I need to be public with I don't even want to call them failed relationships, but I don't know what to do. Can y'all help me, please? Thank you.
Okay, Beatrice, before we tell you anything about your chart, bear in mind, these are just random musings from us. Yeah, don't take it as a real interpretation, because we need more time. You know, as good as we might be, we need more time with all this to really piece it up. But very interesting chart. I already have a few things to say, but I'll let others start. Whoever wants to.
Okay, can I start? I just want to say that the way that I approach astrology is that it's very self-directed. So I would ask, well, what do you want to do first? And then look at astrology, look at the chart to say, well, this might be a good time to do that, rather than whether it's good or bad per se. You know, it's surely about whether you want to be more in the public eye, not whether or not you should, if you see what I mean. That's how I would approach it.
I would also like
is that something that you want, to be more in the public eye, or is it just what would you say?
No, I do. I want to be in the public eye, but I've just been like kind of afraid. I think something with I just myself, I don't know, maybe something about my son hiding again in the 7th house or something, but I always feel like it's hard to describe it, but I've only shared like for a few people of I do want to be in the public eye. That's just it. I ain't gonna share no more. I forgot this is gonna be on YouTube and other people are looking at stuff, whatever. So yeah.
Right. I mean, for that, I would look at the transits and progressions to see maybe like when a more like, I don't know what the word is, opportune time
Yeah.
coming up for you to sort of maybe be more focused on that, I think. So yeah, what have we got?
Thank you, Paula. I appreciate that.
Anyway, that's basically what I'm saying. Anyone else want to chip in with the?
Okay, well, maybe a very slight counterpoint to what Paula said is that yeah, we need to see whether it's the right time now to do something or not do something. That's right. But still, all those planets in their signs and in their houses, the way they are in your chart, they give you some motivations about and desires and tendencies. Just tendencies. There is no guarantee what's going to happen, but you still pulled in some directions more than others. So that's what the chart is giving us. It's like a recipe. It's like, what's the best way to use my energies for them to be the most efficient? So, for example, the best way to use your Neptune, which is the one up here, is in the 9th, 10th house. So I would say on the MC, which is very close to the MC. This is the epitome of public life in astrology, as you probably know, this area here. And your Neptune is extremely close to that area. So when a planet is close to an angle, ascendant, descendant, MC or IC, it is a chief character in the soul, in your soul. So Neptune is extremely important. It also rules your whole chart because it rules your ascendant. We say the ruler of the chart is the ruler of the ascendant. So you've got the Pisces ascendant. Bring us back to Neptune. So the two most visible things in you, the ones that are like the public relations energies in you, they're both Piscean. They're both Neptunian. One is ascendant in Pisces, the other one is Neptune on the MC. So we have like a repetition of topic here. And several things about Neptune, if we want to remind ourselves, not everything, but like is this could be a very public planet. Why? Because it stirs the imagination and it can provoke the imagination of other people, the wider public, in one way or another, the interest, the dreams, the fantasies. It's almost like somebody making a performance of some sort, and that performance having an audience or looking for an audience. So one of the ways Neptune is affecting other people, and you obviously affect the world through your ascendant into your MC, which is both very Neptunian. And so that's a big part of the story. So anytime, I mean, at least once in your lifetime, if you are to follow the prescription of your chart, you would need to, I think you want it or not, the circumstances will take you in a situation where you would have an opportunity to be an influencer of others. And you should better think about how to make the best of that, because that thing as a circumstance is gonna happen, that's for sure. But whether you would squander it or whether you would do the best of it, that's entirely up to you. Now, Neptune is going to bring you there. That's what I think. Neptune is also making a lot of positive aspects, I'd say, kind of supportive aspects to many things in the chart. It's also part of a yod here, which is these two greens, and then between the moon and Mars. So it's very activated in the chart as a whole. So Neptune will appear. At the moment, it's very likely that it will visit somehow. Why? Because the progress moon is right on it. This is the progress moon. And the progress moon is right on top of the Neptune. So this is the progress moon is a very quickly changing thing. So it moves 1 point per month, one little one little degree per month. So at the moment, this month, you see here, moon in the 13th, 20th, 12th, 13th degree of Sagittarius. And your Neptune is exactly in the same degree. So that's happening as we speak. Yeah, in terms of the opportunity to, or at least maybe there isn't really any external opportunity, but you are feeling something, you are wanting something, because your temporary mood, your temporary feeling state, emotional state, which is the progress moon, is activating the Neptune in your chart. And with it, everything else that Neptune is connected with. And then the other angular planet in your chart is the Venus on the DC. That's another important player, maybe as important as Neptune, and they are in a square to each other. So that's extremely important because it won't be so easy for Neptune to just do it. Yeah, it would need to comply with other people, descendants. It would need to learn something about maybe negotiation, maybe about balance with others. It would need to, you would ultimately need to work on your North Node, that we all need to work on our North Nodes. But your North Node in Libra in the 7th house, which is like a double Libra, double Venus kind of thing. So going back to Venus, ruled by Venus is this one. And Venus sets the stage of the whole 7th house. So very Venusian, this whole area is very Venusian. So something you need to resolve with your relationships, I would say, that would be tightly involved with your public expression. So if one works, then the other one will also work, but they would probably not be able to work at the same time, because that's the essence of the square, that the two things on the two sides of the square, they cannot be friends. You know, they cannot do what they do simultaneously. They need to either take turns, or they need to, sign a pact, or somehow agree with each other. So I don't know which one of the two you need to tame, whether you need to tame the Venus side of things here in the 7th house or the Neptune side of things. But my feeling is that probably you would be very much in a hurry to get out of yourself and to be very successful very quickly in the public eye without having solved these issues here in the 7th house first. Because you have the tendency from your previous, say, incarnations to be very self-directed. Aries in the 1st house, the South Node, very like determined, knowing what you want, knowing where you're looking at, and not very used to relationship and negotiation and how can I say, somehow partnering. You need to learn partnering, and that's where everything else is going to start working. That's my very quick take in the first glance.
I need to learn partnering.
Master it.
Well, is there someone who would like to talk before me? No? But she's gone. When she's back, because I want to talk a little bit quickly about this Mars.
Yeah, that's another link.
Yeah, because that's an aspect I share with you. I have Mars square to the nodes. So I have my personal experience of this aspect, that your Mars is not only square to the nodes, at the same time it's square to Pluto, and almost square to the Sun, or on the edge. But Mars square nodes and Mars square Pluto, and as Radilina said, it's also your South Node ruler. So in one word, the lesson is patience. Because with such a Mars, you certainly have a great emotional intensity. You know, Mars square Pluto, it can be like a cooker pressure, and the cooker pressure has to learn not to explode, because something with the charts is also what is inside you, whether you know it and you own it, even if you don't master it, or it happens from outside.
Diotres, we don't hear you. You have to unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was talking to my sister. She was trying to talk to me, and I'm trying to tell her I can't talk right now because of the thing. Yeah, so it's okay. You asked me a question? Because I was trying to tell her.
What did you hear of what I was telling you?
I'm sorry. That's why I was trying to tell her I can't talk because I'm on here. If you could repeat yourself real quick, please. I do apologize for that.
Okay, you've got Mars square to the nodes.
Mars square
to the nodes.
To my node. See, I got a smaller one right here. Okay, Mars square. Okay, what about it though?
And plus square Pluto. That means you need to you learn patience. Mm-hmm. You need to contain. I have this aspect, and so I can share how I lived this aspect and my evolution about it. But before, I believed that when things got emotionally too intense inside, I had to get them out. and actually it's better to contain them, to let them transform inside, and possibly, if relevant, with wisdom, express them in an acceptable form. Because this kind of energy, if it explodes, if it says, no, this can't be the way it is, I have to do something, I have to say something, and it can be destructive. So patience is a great lesson. Containing the energy, trust that the energy can transform within you. Maybe sometimes you can find a way to write on a paper all the angry words that you would throw at someone's face, and then burn, and then possibly symbolically burn the papers. But it's really, there is a wild bull, and you take it by the horns, and because that's the necessary lesson.
Thank you for that. Interesting that you mentioned about patience, because as a preschool teacher previously for about 16 years or so, preschool teacher. Now I'm an adult teacher teaching bicycle education, and people would always tell me about my patience. And I'm like, what patience? But I guess I have it. Being a preschool teacher for so long, you really do need to have patience with little children. I really enjoyed them, and I still enjoy them. But sometimes the patience and the short temperament does occur with adults. And it is something that I work on, because sometimes, more than likely all the time, it really has nothing to do with me. Like whatever they're angry or whatever they're is upset about, whatever, I should not absorb that energy and then me take it in and I start getting angry, upset. So patience is top of my list of attributes of who I am, but I do appreciate that. It's always a quick reminder to always have patience all the time. So
sometimes you are patient, and somehow we push the energy inside, and up it pops up as someone else in front of you.
Yeah, we explode. That's not good. So my question, I like all this being a stellium, and like I said, Paula, you mentioned about me being a public guide. I do that a lot. So I guess my question is about me so far, like being in the public. I teach because I teach bicycle education. But the thing I just wonder, since I have so much energy, like I said, you see in the 7th house, sometimes it's almost all I talk about with people is relationships and dating and stuff. So that's why I kind of wonder, maybe should I channel that energy into, I don't know, talking more with more public people about the ups and the bads, about the good and the bad about relationships and stuff, because since I have so much energy over there.
So you're supposed to be an exemplar of some sort, if everything goes well, of how to exactly deal with this, because your sun is not just in Libra, but in the 7th house. So that's what you're here for in the first place, to learn how to be a good Libra, a good relationship person, to show, balance, patience, and so on. I have a suspicion, even though everything that Jean-Marc said was really spot on, but I have a suspicion that maybe this Mars, and I'm telling you again about it because it's connected to the Libra planets. You see these red lines here. This is the square on one side to this section, and then the square on the other side with the node. Well, this Mars is like the top of the triangle. We call it the top of the T-square. So this is the point of expression of energy. And Mars can be explosive. Mars can be very dangerous sometimes. And I suspect that maybe your Mars is rather internally aggressive. So what do I mean? It's in Cancer. Cancer is a very peaceful sign, very sometimes a passive sign, and it could be, we don't know which side of the square is playing more. Maybe if you are playing more with the Libra, then 5th house also is about working with children very often. That's where your Mars is, and you're expressing it there. You're expressing it as a caretaking Cancer or as a sensitive Cancer, and maybe it is stifling its anger. So it's kind of holding. And then, as Jean-Marc said, this is a very explosive thing. as the bomb can explode at any moment, unexpectedly, if you're not careful. And maybe that's what this whole thing about working with people is about, because you have a lot of chances to be with people and to have to mix and, you know, have dilemmas with people and tragedies and dramas and stuff like that. Because of the many planets in the seventh, you need to learn something there. And maybe, yeah, you need to pass it on also, but you need to have these many experiences so that this gets resolved eventually. You have a Martian thing to be resolved.
Have good news, though.
What's the good news?
The good news is, if you look at the big players there, Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn in Capricorn, there are a few heavy transits opposing your natal Mars, which are behind.
Oh yeah, you must have had a very hard time, in the last year, couple of years, but it's over.
Oh, good. That's good. I feel like my whole life is like, you know, but I try not to think about the negative stuff so much. I really did have a not so good of a childhood. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, when I first got on here and in different various groups, birth natal chart reading, astrology, stuff like that. And I read the comments and stuff like that. And I'm trying to learn on myself. And so I'm getting there slowly but surely. And so I just wanted to confirm, like, I got a lot of stuff in my seventh house. So then, and you see a lot of, with women, I'm speaking to us women, you know, about like, don't let guys treat you like bad and go on to the next one. And you don't have to take all this stuff and blah, 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 wait for the one that's right. Okay, I get all that. But I still have all that stuff in my seventh house and I still want a partner. But that's like the struggle that I'm having. Like, yeah, I see guys and yeah, none of them, well, not none of them, like I don't relate to them. We don't vibe. Okay, on to the next one. But then, you know, I just get...
Dear Trace, we went too long, but just very quickly. Moon square Saturn. This may have to do with this. You can explore it in your own time. Your moon in Taurus is square Saturn in, not a very close one, but still it is a square. Saturn here, the moon here. So there is something going on. Also, maybe continuation of what we already told you, you know, of this impatience of getting what you need. You know, this moon needs to get what it needs quickly, because otherwise it can't hold, it can't wait. Even though it could be also very patient in Taurus, but it's about personal needs. And then Neptune square Venus may lead to some illusionment, I don't know, kind of not having the most sound judgment about other people, and especially partners, because your Venus is right on the descendant, on the partnership area, and it's square Neptune. So potentially you may be, I don't know, strayed away by appearances. Like you look at someone, you hear what they say, and you think, oh, that's the coolest person in the world. But actually, very often later, when you give it a bit more time, your first impression is disproved. You find out that it's not as good as it felt in the beginning. So your Venus has a potential to be misguided, let's say. It doesn't mean it will necessarily be, but that's part of its character because of the square.
Thanks God it's in Virgo.
Thank God it's in Virgo, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's quite a romantic aspect as well, isn't it? Venus and Neptune. So you could be blinded by romance initially. You want that honeymoon period to last forever, but it never does it? No.
You guys are amazing.
Exactly what I meant, Paul. Yeah. So, and with Neptune on the MC, you have to be careful if this guy, you know, whoever he is, somehow is glamorous, somehow has a status out there. Yeah, need to be very cautious about people with status and with fame or with anything like that, because they may not turn out to be what you expected, something like that.
I think that's where the patience comes in as well. Patience to wait and get to know people slowly before you commit to anyone, you know. Find out what they really like over a period of time before you commit yourself emotionally. You know, try and be more patient in that respect.
And this is an advice which is more relevant to you than it will be for somebody else, you see. Because you've got this aspect, and you've got all those things that we talked about. So you are a little bit more prone to this. So that's why you have to be more careful.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Makes sense. I do appreciate this. This has been also helpful. You ladies and gentlemen are so amazing with this, and I want to get to that level where I can just. I want to get to the level. That's why I'm trying to learn about myself so much, so that I can pass this information to my siblings and my own children too, because I'm over 40 and I'm just now getting the grasp of my life. I don't know, but I want to not do that for my young children. They're not young, but not do that for them. So this is amazing. Thank you.
That's great. You went into it when your children are still young and you can explore their charts, as you can be so helpful if you study yourself. If you study yourself, I think you can be one step ahead into guiding them in directions which are more suitable for them than not.
Yeah. Yes.
Relating to them as well. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad that I can use that. I can use my chart today for this week's discussion.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And it's so colorful, but yeah, you see all that energy in the 7th house. That's me.
Yes. Yeah, as somebody that also has a lot of 7th house, I would tell you that I think we need to be careful of how people dependent we are. Yeah, 7th house people. I mean, my son is not there, but a lot of things going on. And when you have so much 7th house, you're very dependent on the response of others. And you're constantly waiting for, even though you may be actually learning more how to do this because you've got the South Node in the opposite side of all this. And the South Node, I don't know how familiar you are, but it's more of a previous tendency, something you've learned you've got like a experience in that, at least you feel like it. So yeah, it's a lot. The whole axis, Aries Libra, is about relationships and balancing those relationships. How far you go with your own stuff, with your own interest, and how much you're willing to compromise and to adjust. That's pretty much the most important question in your life, I guess. It will be.
Great.
I have some questions and some suggestions.
Yeah, Dwayne.
Deltrice, where are you located?
I am in the Cleveland, Ohio area. Cleveland, Ohio area.
Okay. And in the background that's behind you there, is that Cleveland?
Oh, this is just random. This is just a random picture because we was talking about the moon and the sun and the stars and stuff like that. But yeah, no, then I am from Cleveland. This is downtown at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. If you ever come to Cleveland, ladies and gentlemen, come to Cleveland, Ohio. We have a great museum. Okay, I'm going to stop.
I've been there. It was fantastic. The Rock and Roll Hall, our music hall was just tremendous. But the reason, if you could go back to the one with the moon.
Okay. I just found that randomly one time. And so I used it when I was doing a speech. Okay. Is that the one I had? No, I'm sorry. That was a different one. See, I have too much.
Oh, this is nice as well.
Okay, it was this one. You wanted this one. Okay, you wanted this one.
Yeah. So are you aware of the lunation cycle?
The divination cycle?
The lunation cycle.
A lunation cycle? I'm learning. Okay. So not quite all the way, but I'm learning.
Have you been reading Rudyard on that or other sources?
Nope.
Treat her as a beginner, Dwayne. And maybe us also, because...
Well, I want to encourage you to embrace that particular astrological tool, because if we look to your 7th house that we've been talking about, right at the very top end of the 7th house, we have the part of fortune, which is the sun, your sun-moon angle at birth added to your ascendant. Mm-hmm. What that's showing is the potential for great good fortune in your 7th house. Mm. So through your one-to-one committed relationships. I have sun in the 7th as well, so I understand that place. I think so does Carl Jung, the famous psychologist. So there's lots of material available for us in our everyday relationships.
Okay, great. You said, now what is this? Got my pen and paper.
Okay, yeah. The lunation cycle.
Okay. And so do you have a specific book?
That is the title of the book by Dane Rudyard, who pioneered this particular technique.
Okay, I got it.
So it's called the lunation cycle, the book.
Okay. Okay.
A good place to say we had a separate discussion on the lunation cycle a few weeks back. You go to the playlist if you're curious about this, and I also encourage you, because Dwayne is right, there is a lot to discover. It's a bit difficult to explain just in a few words now, if you haven't heard about it, but it's to do with your sun and the moon and their relationship, the phase of the moon under which we were born. It's something extremely important also, but very disregarded by many astrologers, not very known, but it's very important. And we have a full discussion about this, which is in the channel. It's called the lunation cycle. You're
a full moon type.
Okay, I'll definitely look into that. Thank you for sharing.
No, I think she's the one after the full moon, isn't it? Or the one before disseminating.
So you're here to disseminate.
It's 30.
Share.
30 degrees.
Broadly.
32 degrees. 33 degrees after the. I know I'm looking at the. Yeah, okay, I made a mistake.
Yeah, it's very interesting. What we can tell you about your case quickly is that you see your moon in Taurus, your sun in Libra, right?
Right.
So at some point they were together, and then the moon started traveling this way.
Yeah.
And it reached that point. Just before it reached that point, it was a little bit before that. It was exactly opposite your sun. So when it was somewhere in Aries, and that was a full moon.
Mm-hmm.
And you were born slightly after that, several days, I think maybe 2-3 days after the full moon. And people that are born under that phase, one of the key words about their phase of birth is to spread knowledge and to spread not just information but also wisdom, to be connected with others. It's called the disseminating moon phase, and you, as Dwayne said, you were here to disseminate something, to spread. And what are you spreading? You're spreading whatever conclusions or knowledge was reached at the full moon. So the full moon is symbolic for, we now get it. At the full moon we can now see the whole picture. It's the essence of the opposition aspect in astrology, where two things are opposite, so now we can see what's really going on. So you, being born under this phase, are here to be like a communicator of the knowledge and the conclusions that happened in the full moon. So that ties in with your 7th house. That's why we are telling you about all this, because that's also confirming that you're here to build bridges between people.
Yeah. Okay, this is cool. See, I like how. Did you just see that? Like, things connect in my brain, and it's like mind blown. That real mind blown emoji. I love it, and it's just I just see how things are just working together and in sync. And I don't know why sometimes I see the things I see or I do the things I do, but it all works out in the end. So I'm always grateful for it. Even the bad stuff. I do get grateful for the bad stuff because I learned something from it.
Maybe that Venus is making you so optimistic and cheerful. I don't know, even though it's in Virgo, but you see how Venus is ruling the moon, Venus is ruling the sun. Venus is a big deal in this chart. Yeah. And that's the relationship planet above everything else. And that's the ruler of the 7th house, right on the cusp of the 7th house. So, I don't know, this Venus is, I would explore it even further. It's opposite your ascendant. That's a very important planet.
It doesn't mean that I'm doomed for relationships for the rest of my life. I don't want to think
doomed?
Doomed, like, doomed? I don't know. I don't think it, but I'm just saying, based on my previous relationships, like I could, if I really wanted to, I could see going down to a path of like, all guys are dumb and stupid and I'm forever like writing them off, but I don't want to because.
Oh, wait. relationships is not just about romance. The seventh house is not just your relationships with
About everything.
with partners. It's
Partners.
anything one-to-one, including business, including having a business partner for something. Yeah, or teaching someone, being a teacher. But as long as it's one-to-one relationship, where you need to be in between, or either it could be a negotiator role, a mediator role, it could be some sort of a, as I said, bridge between people. So it doesn't need to be a romantic relationship. Yeah? It could be many more things than that.
Well, it could be, I am having fun imagining you on YouTube or on a TV channel, opening a program and saying, hey guys, I'm going to tell you all the things you should avoid in relationships. And believe me, I speak from experience because it took me a long time before learning all these lessons. And maybe if someone told me, I would have met this fantastic guy that I can introduce you to. Here he is, he's my partner. Okay, you can go, that's my program. But I'm going to tell you all the mistakes I've made before him. And blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah.
Thank you. So that's why I'm just saying, like, I do realize that the seventh house is a lot about the other partnerships, but sometimes I do focus on, that romantic one. And so that's why I'm just saying, like, it doesn't mean that I'm doomed for not having a romantic relationship, because now I have this information. That's why I guess now I see it.
It's your purpose to go there and to explore that.
It will be unescapable, I would imagine. You want it or not, there will be something happening. Because when we have so many planets in one house, something happens. We don't know what, but something will happen. So it's a question of how you play it.
Okay. This is good information.
I'm getting this image of, associating with your Neptune. Like, that's very prominent in your chart, and it's like a mystic calling. That's why I'm feeling it. And on that note, I don't know if you know about the birth chart of the United States.
The Sibley chart.
Not the United States, I don't. I mean, I've seen it, but not in detail. I'm too much concerned about mine first.
Well, one detail is that your Neptune sits exactly on the ascendant.
Yeah.
And that's a very significant degree. Now, are you aware of the Sabian symbols?
I did look at a book, and I was yes and no. I'm still a beginner, but I did look at a book, and at one time, actually, I do like to write a lot of stuff, so sometimes that processes it. So in that book, they was talking about the Sabian symbols, and I was writing down my own birth natal chart, charting the coordinates. That was pretty cool. But
well,
I don't know much about
on that note, I would submit that you have a direct line to really deep source of wisdom on the planet. The Sabian symbol for that degree is the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx.
Oh.
It's a very mystic degree on its own, and to have your Neptune exactly conjunct, that is, to me, that is a signature of a full-blown mystic. And when you talk about, sometimes you get it all, and and you're going to get a lot more, girl. Just hang in there. And, and your personal life. I mean, this is the transpersonal planet. This is dragging you up and out, into expansion constantly.
Okay.
And you don't have any control over that.
Nope, I don't.
That's transpersonal.
Mm-hmm.
But you can come into harmony with that and just, be the channel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it will be more powerful than you, isn't it, Dwayne? Because Neptune is an uncontrollable force, and that's usually a societal pull. So society will want something from you, and you would need to deliver it in a way. But this symbol is very interesting because the Sphinx and the pyramids. Dwayne, do you remember in the Pulse of Life? I don't know if you remember that, how the whole sequence of Leo, Virgo, and Libra, and in this chart we can see that there is a lot of Leo, Virgo, Libra, consecutively.
Right.
With this, Leo plus Virgo is the actual Sphinx. And then, so the head of the Sphinx is the Virgo. The body is the lion. And then we go to the pyramid, which is Libra, the Great Pyramids. Yeah, so you see how this symbol is so mystically connected to everything in the chart, to her own chart. Yeah, Deirdre, not many people have such a, what's the opposite to practical? Spiritual charts. I mean, something like that I see, like Dwayne pointed out. So you should probably explore symbols, not just the Sabian symbols, but symbols in general.
Yes, I haven't seen a chart like this, and that's one of the reasons why I saw this information and I wanted to participate in it, because as I'm looking in the different groups and in different books and trying to read comments on other people's placement, okay, maybe someone else got this, let me read it. And I have not seen it anywhere. And I'm like, okay, I know I'm different, but I'm not that, I mean, I can't be that different. But yeah.
Well, we are all different. We all have a role to play. So
I don't know, but I haven't seen a stellium, like so many planets in the
you haven't seen enough yet. That's why.
Is that it? Okay, I haven't seen it. So
yeah, there are so many different cases. And if you want to play with celebrity charts, that French website Astrology is great for that. I've been using it for years. I don't know if you guys use it. I don't like very much the format of the chart, but it doesn't matter too much because you can just search in the search engine. You can search names of famous people, including in history, and very often you get the chart. So you can explore so many different things there and observe them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And that was my sister Dwayne that popped in. I told her to come and wave because, as I keep telling her, talking to my sister a day, and she was leaving now. I'm like, well, come say wait. So come say bye. Okay,
maybe she can come to tell us goodbye because we're approaching the end. I'm sorry if somebody was disappointed that we didn't look at another chart also, but I wanted to do this like concentration on one so that we discover from many different perspectives and go a little deeper into something and see how much more we can discover this way than if we just superficially like look at stuff and leave it there, yeah, and say something about the sun or say something about the moon. But I hope you see how everything in your chart is starting to tie together by everything that people have to say about it,
Yes, it is, and I'm very excited to see, every day, like since I've discovered my birth natal chart, it's been amazing. I'm like, ooh, I can't wait to wake up so I can see what I can learn today, like what's in my birth natal chart. So today I was so excited, like, ooh, I can't wait to get on the Zoom so I can see like what else can I learn. I don't know, it's so exciting. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm really enjoying this, and I just wanted
You're in for a journey. You're in for a journey. It could be very, very enticing to explore.
I look forward to seeing your YouTube channel.
Yeah,
I got a few. So the thing is, I guess, like I was telling someone else, I just didn't know. So it's like scattered. I have a YouTube channel for my bikes and a YouTube channel for me personally, but I just doesn't know. And I kind of put random stuff up there now because I just didn't know. But now it's almost like the birth natal chart. It's almost like a roadmap to
exactly
what it is that your life's purpose. So I have now a map.
I would say you should listen to what Jean-Marc said about the topic that you need to concentrate on. Yeah, I think that was extremely important. And I agree with him very much that you need to talk about personal experience in relationships. And these are the two key things. One is to be personal experience because you've got the South Node in Aries in the first house, square Mars in the fifth. That would tell me that you did have this, maybe not in this lifetime, but maybe you had it in a previous lifetime, and you at least have drawn some conclusions and can speak from experience. And then, and don't necessarily think that you need to be giving universal truths, because inevitably people will identify with what you're saying. You've got Neptune on the MC and Pisces ascendant, so there will be people, there will be your own audience out there. And so, yes, I think he's very right that the topic has to be relationships.
I don't mean to laugh like that, but if you guys just know like what is like almost in my head like all the time about relationships, and it's like sometimes I get tired of talking about it in my head and talking about it with other people, but it's comfortable and I know about it because I've lived it. So I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it, ladies and gentlemen. Y'all gonna be so proud of me.
What are you waiting for? We're looking forward to seeing something from you then.
Live your truth.
Yes,
Live your
thank
truth,
you.
exactly, Shinja.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to follow the birth chart if you want to be
Yes.
happy.
You guys are so amazing. Thank you so much. Other people should participate. Well,
Spread the word.
Spread the word, yeah.
Spread the word.
I will. I do. Like, I know, I think it was you mentioned, Jean-Marc, about being an influencer before, I think. And I do have a little bit of people that I suggest things to them and they, follow up and then actually work and stuff like that. So I'm pretty excited to just keep on with what I've been doing. And now that I have a roadmap.
Okay. Now that would be great if you help us out as well, as we're being very quiet and, yeah, not very vocal. But because we're allowing for people to just intuitively find us and for the right people to find us when they need. So obviously, I feel like you were supposed to be here today. I hope it was helpful for you and for others, also for all of you, to have this exercise. And yeah, I think this chart is actually also reminding us of what we wanted to do next week. Do you remember? Topic for next week? Libra. Exactly.
Libra.
Really? The topic next week is Libra. I'm joining
Next
in.
week is Libra because Deuteris, this is our very last archetype of all the 12.
Oh.
Done all the others.
Libra.
We only haven't done Libra. So we were postponing that until we come to Libra season, which is already going to be next week, 17th. Oh no, it's not next week. Not yet. My mistake. So I got a bit ahead of myself here. I thought next week we would be able to do that, but okay, never mind. We can still do it next week if you want, or the following week.
Following week.
If you wish, you can.
Let's do Libra.
Propose something else for next.
The following week, it will be a new moon in Libra.
Okay, so it must be the following week then.
The 17th.
The 17th or the 24th? Let's take a look quickly. So, oh, the 17th. Yes, you're right, actually.
New moon in Libra.
So how come new moon in Libra on the 17th? Is it not too early?
I say new moon in Libra. It's a new moon.
So that means that the sun would have entered Libra on the 17th. Is that right?
No, well, it's a new moon, but I'm not sure it's in Libra.
No, 17th is Virgo.
It's a new moon in Virgo.
It's a new moon in Virgo on the 17th.
It's new moon in Virgo.
Yeah, but then on the same day when the new moon is, it also switches, the moon switches to Libra as well. So yeah, it looks like it, but it's actually in Virgo. Yeah, well, whatever you want, I don't mind. Shall we do it next week or on the 24th?
Well, what would the other options be if we didn't do that one then, do you think?
You mean for next week, Paul?
Yeah.
Let me see what we discussed, speaking about solar return charts. I think Jean-Marc wanted to say a personal life story about a solar return. Well, this is one of the topics that we mentioned.
Saturn return, I can. Yeah.
Not Saturn, the solar return. The solar return chart.
No, I don't have a lot to say about the solar return.
Oh, did you mean Saturn return last time when you mentioned?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood you. I thought it was to do with solar return, but never mind. So yeah, solar returns could be one topic. The other topic we discussed was what?
Radilina, would it be a good topic to discuss planetary returns? So, for example, Jupiter return or Chiron return.
Planetary returns, you mean the cycles of the slower planets and the stages of the cycles. I think for this to make any sense, as a discussion, because to see how much we plan to cover, but we actually never get there. We have to choose one planet. So, for example, we can choose Saturn and explore the cycles of Saturn, which is a major topic on its own. It's such a big thing. And we can see, the different squares and the returns and so on. And yeah, that could be an opportunity for a Saturn return story. Yeah, also.
But you did do the signs of the zodiac before
Not the
I
signs,
joined.
the actual, well, actually, that's a great topic because it's the cycle of Saturn, for example. And you know how the cycle of Saturn determines our whole life. And especially when Saturn travels through the houses of the chart. And the moments when I was even thinking to start offering one particular, very specific consultation to people in the future, which is only to do with this. Charting on a wheel, the dates, the years and the dates, just month and year, of when Saturn crossed each one of the cusps of the houses in their charts. And then, spend several couple of years into that particular, because these are demarcation periods of life. And especially when Saturn crosses the angles of the chart, we can predict a lot of things around this. And we can, speak about major crises and transformations and so on, turning points in life, and they can be very interesting. So we can plot at least twice that cycle in a normal person's lifetime. And especially if you're over 30, you can do it from the beginning of your life to 30, and then again, and even see in what years of the ones to come in the future you can expect major turning points in your development. So that can be extremely interesting, also to explore the past and the past patterns. And I did a talk on this some time ago, which is on my page, about the different ages of Saturn and what we can expect from the different ages, starting from 7 years old to 14, 21, 28, and so on. And I think if you want, we can choose that as a topic, the major stepping stones of the cycle of Saturn, something like that.
I like that idea anyway.
Can I offer another possibility?
Yeah, sure. But,
coming out of our session with Diltrice here and her Neptune on the zenith, I'm always interested in, I don't know, it's sometimes called the most exalted planet.
Mm-hmm.
Or, yeah, that's kind of the way I've been phrasing it myself. So would that be that could be a whole session in itself, I would think.
Do you mean planet at the top of your chart when you say exalted? Okay. Yeah, I'm very interested in that topic too.
Could it be like a bucket handle planet, the planet that leads the chart in any way? Is that what you mean, Dwayne? Essentially, not necessarily on the zenith, but just the planet, the main.
No, actually, I was thinking just in terms of the zenith.
The zenith, right? Okay.
Okay. Well, there is a slight argument about, is it the zenith or the ascendant, which gives this. Maybe we can look for cases of both while concentrating on the zenith. But I was thinking, if we do that topic, maybe I can choose several charts of celebrities just for a change, of very, very well-known people that I find something like that going on in their charts, so that we can have a more broad discussion. Because otherwise, if we use our charts, like we did Diltrice's chart today, we don't know her. She needs to give us a bit of background and, explain what's going on in her life and so on. So for us to start making sense. But if it's somebody famous, then we can straight away jump into it and see how we see it, that prominent planet in the life of that person. And okay, maybe we can concentrate just on the MC, because that's connected to celebrity status and to being somebody out there, visible and judged by us, could be next time.
Those are all good topics. Even as far as me from a newbie, I was able to still keep up with the terminology you guys were saying. I would be interested in listening to that next topic.
Okay, well, we will be looking for people like you, Diltrice, that have something going on around the top of their charts. So if they have a planet like you do Neptune, and this is one of the greatest signs of celebrity, possible celebrity status, to have, a planet around the MC, or especially Neptune is even more. But don't take my word for it. This is no guarantee you would become a celebrity or anything like that. But it's possible.
You can become a local celebrity.
It could be a local celebrity, yeah. Yes.
A little bit of a local celebrity here in my neighborhood, just a little bit.
Yeah. The scale doesn't matter. The principle matters. Yeah. So you could be a small circle celebrity or something. Anyway, so I was thinking of selecting several charts, maybe 3 or 4 maximum, of very well-known people that have a planet around the MC, or several planets or something prominent.
Can't.
We can all look at that as an exercise.
That's very interesting.
Okay? So we do that next time.
Here I have a question.
Yeah.
Everyone doesn't have a planet around their MC?
No, not at all.
No.
I do.
I do.
Only the selected few.
I guess that's probably why, because I don't have planets in all the houses, so I guess it makes sense. But I just thought everyone, the North Node, I thought everybody, okay, I'm learning.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, thank you.
It's a pretty unique thing, yeah. It's a pretty specific thing.
Okay,
Yeah.
I see, thanks.
But also to note that it does depend on the house system you're using. So keep that in mind.
Right, I do know that part too. I know there's more.
Okay, so we agree that I'm going to stick to Placidus. All the charts today, well, actually, it was just one, but all the charts I had prepared were Placidus because I thought that was the most universal one people use in general. It is, I also discovered some sort of a middle ground house system, which doesn't give a lot of fluctuations to others. So yeah, let's stick to that if you want. And
it doesn't matter which house system you use if you're looking at the MC, because that's just like the point.
Yeah, you're right.
In a way, it's not the same as the 10th house cusp anyway, necessarily.
Well, not exactly, because maybe Sveti will correct us here, that if you use whole sign, it may move or something like that.
It doesn't matter. It's interchangeable, isn't it? You can use it as the 10th house cusp, but you don't have to. It's a point in itself, isn't it? It stands alone.
Yeah, you're right, Paul, that even if we use whole sign, it's going to be the 10th house cusp anyway. So, yeah. Okay, so we agree it needs to be the 10th house cusp of any system that we decide to use.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was trying to make the opposite point, that if we look at the MC, it doesn't matter what house system we use, because the MC stands alone. Anyway, it doesn't have to be the 10th house cusp. The MC is the MC, isn't it?
Actually, you're right. I got things mixed up.
I thought that's what Dwayne was getting at by the zenith. He's talking about the MC rather than just the 10th house cusp, because they can differ depending on what house system you're using. But the MC will stay the same point in the chart, won't it?
Well, you see, Paula, there is a thing that
it'll stay on the same degree of the zodiac. That's what I mean.
But that's because Okay, but that's if you look at the zodiac. But for those people that are really concentrating on those house systems that are, the quadrant ones, like Placidus and all the others, for them it is very important that the MC is the cusp of the 10th house.
Yeah, I understand that. That's fair enough. I was just making the point that the MC is the MC, whichever house system you're going to use.
Yes.
It stays the same point. That's all I'm saying.
All right. Let's not get too much into that. Yeah.
But if you're looking for themes for the future, we can go all around the zodiac with each planet. So we can do a moon in Virgo session, moon in Libra, moon in.
That's specific. We need to do, what was it, 1,600 and something to cover it all.
Yeah, but that way you're fine with themes.
So how are we going to choose between those 1,600 and something options of what to look at? Randomly.
Yeah, randomly.
Okay. Yeah, we did. That's why we started with these like last week or the week before actually. Virgo, sixth house, and the planet. You know, all in one. But yeah, if you want to go even more specific, why not? We can do that as well for a change, sometime. Yeah. Look at, and obviously we're going to choose Sun in Scorpio, the first topic. That would be it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there will be no escape. Okay. All right, it's already late, so thanks so much for being here and for staying until the end. We decided for next week what, finally? The prominent
Most
planet
exalted.
on the MC celebrities. Yeah? I have no idea how I'm going to title this, but I'll figure it out. Okay?
Yeah.
And then next we're doing Libra on the 24th.
Yes, ready. Great.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
inviting
Bye, and thank you so
Great.
much.
Radina.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.